They called me the Maid at dinner, so I quietly crushed their $690 million empire. We were sitting at dinner when it happened, right there in front of the whole Bennett dynasty. My billionaire husband's family didn't just slight me, they humiliated me in full view of their so-called empire. His aunt curled her lip and said, "Why is the maid sitting at our table?" Like I was a piece of gum stuck to her shoe. I didn't say a word, just kept my cool. Then, while they all sipped their fancy wine, I quietly sent a message that stalled a $690 million deal. And just like that, the empire they were so proud of started showing cracks. But before I dive into all that, let me say this. I've noticed the channel's been slowing down a bit lately. If you're here and you like these stories, hitting that subscribe button is the easiest way to show support. It's fast, it's free, and it really helps keep this community growing strong. My name's Naomi Bennett. Until not long ago, I played the part of the quiet, put-together wife standing in the background of one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast. People used to say I was the lucky one, the maid who married a mogul. Some Cinderella story that didn't quite make sense to them. But what no one seemed to recognize, especially not his family, was that I wasn't just a pretty accessory on Julian's arm. I was the one who helped build a big chunk of the very empire they loved to brag about. That one humiliating dinner? It changed everything. I met Julian Bennett 5 years ago. Back then, I was deep in the trenches, working operations at a small boutique hotel he'd invested in. Not scrubbing floors, no matter what his aunt would eventually claim. I was handling logistics, sealing vendor contracts, and turning a barely breathing hotel into a well-oiled profit machine in less than 8 months. Julian noticed. He had that sharp edge to him. Smart, sure, maybe a little spoiled, but he genuinely respected the work I was doing. And yeah, we fell in love. Not because we came from the same world, we didn't. We got together in spite of that. When we got married, I got the kind of welcome you give someone you're stuck with. Polite smiles, cold handshakes, and eyes that scan my dress tags. His mother, Evelyn, couldn't stand the fact that I didn't come from old money. His aunt, Loretta, practically gagged when she found out I used to split a cramped studio with 3 roommates. They didn't think I belonged. But Julian had my back, at least at first. Then came the big merger. It was a $690 million hotel acquisition I'd spent nearly a year grinding on. I wasn't just showing up, I was in the thick of it. I dealt with foreign investors, pored over architectural plans, and even visited sites that had been leveled by disasters to scout out rebuild opportunities. The board didn't buy in right away, not until I presented a 45-slide strategy deck forecasting a 240% return over the next 10 years. I wasn't just Julian's wife. I was the one making the whole thing work. But sitting at that dinner table, you'd think I was invisible. That night shattered everything. We were in the grand dining room of the Bennett estate. The place was pure excess. A chandelier so big you could rent it as an apartment, walls covered with stiff old portraits of men who probably never lifted more than a wine glass in their lives. Everyone was there. Evelyn, Loretta, their uppity cousins, a handful of board members, and even some major international investors who'd flown in for the week. I wore a soft ivory dress that was elegant without screaming for attention, with my mother's pearl drop earrings, one of the last things she ever gave me. I smiled, kept the small talk light, and tried not to flinch at the passive-aggressive remarks, like how my dress looked better suited for a server. Then Loretta turned to me, narrowed her frosty eyes, and raised her voice just enough to make sure no one missed it. "Who let the maid sit at this table?" The whole room fell dead silent. The kind of silence that feels like a punch to the gut. My fork froze halfway up, and my throat tightened. I felt the heat rise in my chest, and my eyes burned, but I didn't let it show. Around me, some folks chuckled awkwardly, others just looked anywhere but at me. And Julian? He shifted in his seat, took a sip of his wine, and said absolutely nothing. Not a single word in my defense. So I sat there, quiet, sipping water like it was the most important thing in the world. Not because I was too scared to speak up, but because I had something smarter in mind. Loretta had no clue what she'd just triggered. I smiled politely, excused myself to the powder room, and sent one text: "Freeze the merger. We need to revisit some terms." Signed it, Naomi. That was all it took. By the time morning rolled around, while the Bennetts were still patting themselves on the back for their little power play, my legal team was already reaching out to the board and international partners. Concerns had suddenly come up. We needed time to reevaluate. And just like that, the foundation started to shake. When the foreign investors realized I wasn't just a silent trophy wife, but the brain behind the whole operation, panic set in. Everything changed. They didn't trust the Bennetts anymore. They trusted me. By the end of that week, 2 of our biggest investors had backed out completely. The board stepped in and demanded the whole thing be reassessed. Then the press got wind that trouble was brewing inside the so-called crown jewel of the Bennett empire. Within 3 days, their stock took an 11% hit. Loretta had the nerve to send me a fruit basket. I returned it, unopened. That weekend, Julian finally confronted me. His tone was steady, but his jaw was clenched tight. "Naomi, what are you doing? This merger matters. You're being irrational." "Irrational?" I repeated, not bothering to mask the edge in my voice. "You sat there and watched your aunt call me a maid, in front of board members and international investors, and you didn't say a damn word." "I wasn't trying to embarrass you," he offered weakly. "You didn't have to," I shot back. "Your silence did all the work for you." He tried to backpedal, to pass it off as family being old-fashioned or stuck in their ways. He said they didn't mean it, that they were just traditional. But he missed the point entirely. This wasn't just about one comment. It was about all the other times he'd let things slide. All the gala nights, family meetings, and social events where his relatives chipped away at my dignity, and he never once stood up. He didn't want to upset the people who signed the checks. So I did it for him. I rocked the boat he was too scared to touch. Over the next few weeks, I sat down, one-on-one, with the key stakeholders. I laid it all out, my reasons, my boundaries. Some of them nodded, understanding. Others tried to change my mind. But I made it crystal clear. If I wasn't going to be treated like an equal, I had no interest in helping to uphold an empire that was propped up on snobbery and entitlement. I still loved Julian, but something in me had shifted. I had poured years into this, built it from the ground up, sacrificed more than anyone in that room could even fathom. I didn't climb my way out of poverty just to be laughed at by people who were born rich and never earned a thing. And I sure as hell wasn't going to apologize for being the smartest person in the room. At a private board meeting, I made it official. I stood up and announced that the deal was dead. No statement to the press. No dramatic exit. Just a quiet end to years of work and millions in future projections. Evelyn looked like she might hurl her pearl necklace across the table. Loretta called me a liability right to my face. And Julian? He didn't say a single word during the car ride home. That night, I sat alone in the penthouse living room. The place was quiet, except for the soft clink of my teacup against its saucer. I stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows, taking in the city skyline I used to dream about back when I lived in a shoebox apartment with peeling paint and shared bills. I wasn't angry anymore. Just clear. They saw me as some maid who lucked out and married into wealth. But what they never realized was, I was the one keeping their legacy intact. And now I was the one dismantling it, piece by piece. The morning after I pulled the plug on that $690 million deal, the entire Bennett family was thrown into full-blown crisis mode. Word of the collapse spread like wildfire, way too fast for them to control it. The media ran wild, speculating about everything from insider corruption to a hostile takeover. Headlines screamed about the downfall of the once unshakable Bennett brand, and shareholders went into panic mode. But the real story? The truth was a lot quieter, and it was sitting right there in my hands. And no one else knew it. Not yet. In the days that followed, Julian kept trying to reach me. His first few messages were soft. We need to talk. I miss you. Let's figure this out. But as the silence stretched, his words started to bite. You've embarrassed my entire family. You've made this personal. This wasn't your decision to make alone. But that's just it. He never understood. It absolutely was my decision. I told him long ago that being with me meant standing beside me, not parking me behind him like a set piece. I wasn't his ornament. I wasn't going to keep my mouth shut and play nice while the rest of them treated me like background noise. I had built more, brokered bigger, balanced risk better than he or any of his born wealth cousins ever could. And yet somehow, I was always the one being underestimated. Like I showed up to the table with a feather duster instead of a balance sheet. So I moved out. No drama. No big goodbye. Just a simple note on the kitchen counter. It said, I'm not your decoration, Julian. And I won't be your family's doormat. I checked into a suite at a boutique hotel, one I'd helped fund 3 years earlier when it was barely more than a blueprint and a dream. The staff greeted me like royalty. They remembered. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally exhale. Not as Mrs. Bennett. Just Naomi. It felt like freedom. And yeah, it was a little terrifying too. About 2 weeks after everything came crashing down, someone showed up I hadn't expected, Marcus Liam, one of the original international investors who'd supported the merger from day one. He didn't come to rehash the past or dig for gossip. He simply looked at me and said, you saved me a fortune. I trusted your instincts then. I trust them now. So what's next? And with that one question, something inside me clicked. I'd spent years building up someone else's legacy, pouring my time, energy, and ideas into a family that barely tolerated me. Maybe it was time to create something of my own. So I picked up the phone, reached out to 3 people I trusted with my life, 2 brilliant women and 1 sharp, dependable man I'd worked with before. No egos, no red tape, just shared vision and mutual respect. Over the next 6 weeks, we quietly built something new. A lean, intelligent investment syndicate focused on high-end hospitality innovation across Asia, Europe, and South America. This wasn't just a rebound. This was a revolution. I didn't just walk away from the Bennetts. I stepped into something 10 times more powerful. Meanwhile, the Bennetts weren't faring so well. Without my guidance, the failed merger left a hole in their finances that they had no clue how to fill. Lawsuits started bubbling up. A few high-profile executives jumped ship. Word of internal conflicts leaked into the press. Evelyn tried to salvage the brand by hosting a glitzy charity gala, hoping pearls and red carpets could still distract people. But no one was buying the act anymore. Loretta? She tried to shift all the blame onto me, claimed I'd sabotaged the whole thing out of spite. But when leaked emails surfaced, ones where she mocked my background and doubled down on that infamous Maid comment, the board turned colder than ice. Eventually, Julian reached out again. This time, there was no fury in his messages, just exhaustion. And something that sounded a lot like regret. Can we meet? Just once. No pressure. I miss us. I agreed, not to rekindle anything, but to put it all to rest. We met on the rooftop of the Bennett Plaza Hotel, the very first property I'd helped bring back from the brink. The city stretched out around us like a quiet witness. Julian looked worn down. Gone was the polished, smooth-talking air I had married. In his place was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He gazed out at the skyline, then back at me. You really did all this, he said, almost in disbelief. I never meant to hurt you, I said, my voice calm and steady. But I also wasn't going to let your family walk all over me. Even them? He asked, as if still trying to understand. Especially them. He nodded slowly, swallowed the lump in his throat. I should have stood up for you that night. Yes, I said. You should have. There was a long pause, just the 2 of us and the sound of the wind moving through the city. Then, gently, he asked, is there any way back? I looked at him, really looked. For us? No. But for you? Maybe, if you can learn how to stand on your own without stepping on someone else to do it. And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant or bitter. I just felt done. The Bennett name didn't mean anything to me anymore. It carried no weight in the world I was building. I wasn't Naomi Bennett now. I was Naomi Ellis, a name from my mother's side. A name I chose for myself. It was my mother's side that taught me how to fight, not loud and flashy, but with quiet strength and unshakable resolve. Taking back her name was the last step in closing that chapter of my life. So I made it official. Naomi Ellis. 6 months later, the first project under my new venture, Ellis & Holt, opened its doors in Patagonia, a luxury eco-hospitality hub that blended high-end comfort with sustainability. Before we even launched, investors were lining up, eager to be part of something fresh and forward-thinking. When Forbes listed me as one of the top rising moguls in the industry, I smiled. Not for the title, but because I got there on my own. I didn't need anyone else's name stitched onto my future. I wasn't standing in anyone's shadow anymore. I was the one casting it. I had become the empire. The Bennetts? They're still around. The brand still exists, but the luster's faded. Their name doesn't carry the weight it used to. They learned the hard way that arrogance isn't just expensive, it's dangerous. Because sometimes the cost isn't dollars. It's losing the one person who was quietly holding it all together. They know that now. I still get invites from them, believe it or not. Holiday cards from Julian. The occasional email from Loretta after the Patagonia launch. She even reached out to discuss a potential partnership. I didn't answer. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some doors need to stay closed. Some empires crumble. And others? Others rise from the ashes. Me? I built mine from the dust they once said I came from. Some stories end in silence. Mine ended in power. I didn't need their approval. I just had to remember who I was before they tried to rewrite me. And now? Now they'll never forget it.